department considering doing more concrete paving in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to member opposite for the question. I agree with the honourable member. Those two sections of the highway, one of which is in my own constituency, have stood up very well. In fact, many times constituents will say to me, you know, they've watched how pavements has happened on both ends of that, and yet that's definitely stood the test of time. And I think the honourable member would agree and understand as well that, you know, cement versus pavement, there's quite a bit of a higher cost to pavement, but obviously it lasts a lot longer. But I can tell the honourable member that that a tender will go out sometime this summer or fall, actually for a section of 101 between Hansport and Falmouth, where there'll be alternative. The tender will allow for that type of construction the honourable member is talking about. Sorry, go out this spring. I'm corrected. It will go out this spring. But it will allow for that type of pavement the honourable members are construction the honourable members talking about. And what will happen once we get the bids to determine the life cycle analysis will be done of the project, and then determination will be made of what type of construction would actually take place. But there will be an opportunity on 101 this year.
Honourable Member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Naturally, with the high price of oil and possibly going higher, probably it would be, you know, maybe a little more economical for the department to consider doing more concrete paving. You know, with the several concrete pavement projects that government has already approved over the years, I'm just wondering what's the department's view or evaluation on doing more concrete work on our roads?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the member opposite. Because of the length of time it takes for concrete to actually set, there's only opportunity in the province to actually call tenders for new construction. So that limits us to some certain extent as to which projects can actually go forward. But obviously the department is very pleased with the results of the cement projects that all members talking about, and as I said earlier, we are looking at other ones. There is an issue around cost and upfront cost, obviously for us and on these tenders. But as the honourable member just mentioned, certainly those numbers are closing as petroleum prices increase and liquid asphalt increases. Those numbers continue to close. But I can tell the honourable member that we have and we'll let more tenders out where there's an opportunity for alternative ways of construction. And again, we are pleased with the results, and we'll see what that brings.
The Honourable Member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one final question. I'm just curious if the minister has the information in terms to, you know, what's the price cost to pave 1 kilometre of concrete pavement versus paving 1 kilometre with asphalt. Would the minister know what the cost involved?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works. Member of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And difficult to give exact numbers today because of the change in liquid asphalt. But however, I'm told that it's approximately 10 to 15% more for concrete, 10 to 15% more for concrete. But obviously, with the life cycle of extension of that, it makes it certainly makes it a good investment.
The Honourable Member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the Minister for his information. I want to move to another area, something that I've been getting calls on over the years, and I'm sure I'm not the only MLA. And this area is claims for vehicle damage. Over the years, Mr. Chair, I've been contacted by individuals whom have been involved in special circumstances where their vehicle has suffered some damages on our roads and have forwarded a claim to the Department for compensation. I'm trying to get a better understanding on how the department deals with these claims. I'm sure my colleagues are probably wondering as well. So my first question, what happens to a claim that is received by your department looking for compensation? from an unfortunate incident that happened on our roads.
The Honourable the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the member opposite. When a complaint comes into Department of Transportation Infrastructure Renewal, that goes to our risk management section, whereby an investigation will be done to make a determination whether, in fact, the department didn't do something it should do in regards to the condition of the roads or notification of the public. And so an assessment and an investigation is done within that section of the department, and then determination is made whether or not the payment should be made.
Yeah. The Honourable Member for Clare.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, most claims that I'm aware of that have been forwarded to the department from my area have almost all been turned down. So I'm just curious, are most of the claims filed? I'm not alone, I hear. I'm just wondering, Minister, are most claims that are forwarded or filed with your department for compensation turned down?
The Honourable the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the honourable member. The answer is yes.
The Honourable Member for Clare.
Thank you. I guess I'm looking for maybe a little bit of information here. Could the minister, or does the minister have any good advice to pass on to his colleagues in this House on, and maybe to the general public that's listening here this morning, who may have to send a claim to its department in the future for compensation? I guess what I'm looking for is, what information is needed, what do we need to include with these requests, or maybe what not to include with these requests. The fact that the majority of them are turned down by the risk management section in the department. I'm just curious if the minister has a little bit of information that he could share with his colleagues in the House.
The Honourable the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
I'd like to thank the honourable member for the question. Actually, that's probably a question, and I won't do this, but that's a question that actually we could take up probably the rest of our time here today, and I'll try to condense it down to say we have changed the process in regards to determination and processing of claims. Give an example, and what I will say is this: the department has a lot less claims now than it did years back, but it's paying tremendously higher percentage of those claims. An example would be of windshield claims last year. 89% of those claims were paid. One thing I want to say is that there are a lot of different types of claims that come into the department, and we've equipped our trucks with GPS. So, and I'll give an example of a case, a scenario, I guess, where someone would make a claim that truck number whatever at a certain date, a certain time, a certain place, snow fell off it or rock fell off it and caused an accident. We can tell by our GPS exactly at that time and that date where that vehicle actually was. In fact, it's been used in some cases where it's shown that the truck actually was somewhere else. But again, and on the other hand, though, it's also helped pay claims where I remember I talked to the risk manager one day, and he told me that an assessment of a claim come in, and within a few seconds a few minutes, where the individual claimed they were, and it was debris, it was a rock or whatever, hit their vehicle and cracked their windshield. The GPS showed that truck was exactly there, exactly that place and time where the complainant said. So it works both ways. But I will say that the process has been streamlined, and as a result of that, we are getting less claims, but we're paying a higher percentage of those claims that are actually coming in. So, but the answer to the honourable member's question, the department would want that obviously the road that it happened, what the issue was there any signage? We would from that determine whether any complaints have been made, so the local depot, OS, or area manager were aware of that situation, and also again the time, place, and the type of damage that was done, and if it was a vehicle of ours that was involved, the type of vehicle and so on.
The honourable member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess just to try to close up, probably one of the most common one that we often hear is motorists hitting a relatively large pothole and the vehicle is either thrown on one side or to the other side of the road, certainly encounters damages. The department had no signage whatsoever to warn motorists of the upcoming hole in the road. Then, unfortunately, once the motorist involved either needs new tires or new some repairs on their vehicle, like I guess the part that I find very strange, for the department not to accept any responsibility of their own. It seems to be always, 100% the driver at fault in these cases. I could certainly understand if there was some, signage to warn drivers that be careful, slow down. There's a big pothole in front, up ahead. But most times there's no signage. But at the same time, when motorists do submit claims to the department, the department has done absolutely nothing wrong. They have no responsibility. It falls squarely on the motorist's shoulders. So I'm just curious from the minister's point of view, if the department has no sympathy whatsoever for motorists that do submit claims to his department, to try to blame his staff out in the field, or if it's basically, again, strictly 100% full responsibility on the motorists. Probably in the daytime, it's a lot easier for the motorists, to see what's ahead and slow down or be careful. But at nighttime, and especially if it's foggy, raining, snowing, you don't have usually that much warning when you come up to that pothole in the middle of the road and you have to drive right into it. So I'm just curious if the minister has any comments on that.
The Honourable the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
No luck.
And just, Minister, before you start, I would ask that members just lower the noise level a little bit. I know how much you all enjoy being here, but it'd be nice to be able to hear the Minister and the member for Clare. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the member opposite for the question. I should correct, I misspoke a moment ago, and I said the claims coming in the department are up. The percentage of payment for claims that come in is up very, very substantially higher, but the average payout per claim is down. And just in regards to the issue around potholes, I know the honourable member is interested. Actually, 60% of claims for potholes are paid. So I know that, yeah, and it's a high number, but 60% of the claims that come into our department for pothole complaints are paid. I do want to say that the department and the areas and the regions throughout the province would have regular patrols of highways. Whether in the wintertime it's for, whether it's slippery, whether it requires salt, whether it's for, requiring snow removal, whether it needs a gravel road, needs whatever. So, and along with those regular patrols, and also part of the duty is to determine what sections of roads need have potholes or whatever that need to be addressed. Those patrols are actually recorded with what the members, the employee would observe. That's actually recorded. There's a sequence of how often those patrols are to take place. If an actual patrol took place, for example, and a pothole was noted, and a sign was put up to warn the motorists that a pothole was there, and someone hit it after that, the department would argue that even though it wasn't repaired, it was actually signed and to alert the traveling motorist about that pothole. But if in fact we found that either if the department was aware, for example, if the department was aware of a particular piece of highway where there's potholes and it was either was not signed or not fixed, or if a member of the community calls and makes the department aware of a particular pothole or bad section of road, and we either don't sign it or fix it, and the damage is caused as a result of that, then I would suggest that the claim will be considered and probably paid. And again, when you look at the number of pothole claims in this province that are paid, 60% is quite a high number. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Clare.
Well, Mr. Chair, I would be, extremely surprised. I'm not aware of one case that was submitted in the last 15 years in Clare that I'm aware of. Maybe some individuals have gone directly to the department for compensation. But I hear just talking with some of my colleagues here, they're basically surprised as well that the department has a 60% payout rate. So anyway, I guess we're just going to continue and hope that try harder when constituents do file claims in the future, that we take the minister's suggestions and maybe hope that these claims will be considered favorably by the department. Mr. Chair, I want to touch on my next topic is on fatalities on our roads. I know my colleague from King's West last night did begin talking about this. Mr. Chair, last year, 99 people lost their lives in traffic accidents across our province. 99 people, that's a lot, of course. I guess my question to the minister is, what is the department doing to try to curb this rising number of highway fatalities in our province?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the member opposite for what I determine is a very important question, a very important issue for Nova Scotians, and something we all have to take very seriously. And as I mentioned last night in in the committee, certainly the condition of our highways is paramount, and I think we're doing an exceptional job there in regards to twinning more roads. That will lead to safer highways. Education will help. One of the big, and I mentioned again to the member last night, you remember a couple of days ago maybe, that when it comes to enforcement, I don't think we can do enough enforcement to help make our roads safer. And engineering is one thing, and education is something, but I think enforcement, when you look at the pilot project we have in the Southwest, where the RCP and the police have come together, and the amount of road checks they've done, and as a result of that, the number of impaired driving charges, the number of seatbelt charges, the number of suspended driving charges, the number of other Motor Vehicle Act charges. There's a tremendous amount of people out there in this province that continue to break the law every day, and I think that the more resources we can put on our highways to discourage that, particularly speed and distraction and impaired driving, which we know are leading causes. I think I'm right in saying this. One death on our highways, in my mind, and I did hear the honourable member last night from King's talk about the 101, and I couldn't agree more, and I would never try to downplay the importance of us doing everything we can as a government to ensure we make our highways as safe as possible. But and again, one death on our highways is too much, and those families that suffer that is terrible. But I will say that last year was a very high year. It's not something we should be proud of, but I think this legislature has passed some changes to the Motor Vehicle Act. It's passed some issues around road safety that we talked about, one being the crosswalk, but many others. And as well, hopefully today we'll pass another budget that will increase and give an opportunity for communities across this province to have more resources for enforcement. I think collectively together it's a problem that we all face. We shouldn't politicize an issue such as this. The deaths on our highways in this province is something we should all, as legislators, do everything we possibly can to work together to address. And I want to congratulate the folks across from me for supporting those initiatives that I know are very important to Nova Scotians, and I think that we need to continue to work together and do everything we can to ensure that we reduce the number of fatalities and injuries on our highways.
Honourable Member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, 26 of the 99 fatalities that happen in our province happen down in the valley. I know yesterday we were talking about passing lanes. This government has made a formal announcement that they're looking at building passing lanes, especially between Kingston and Berwick in the next 3 years. But I would suggest to the minister, when you leave Bridgetown and right into Coldbrook, there's no passing lanes between that stretch of highway. when I look at the number of fatalities, not all of them happen on Highway 101, but certainly a large number of these fatalities did. Again, I would certainly encourage the minister to maybe move on these passing lanes, on building these passing lanes as soon as possible. I know this has been ongoing for many years. For the government, try to encourage the government to look at constructing passing lanes. I don't think there's a need to have a divide highway between Bridgetown and Coldbrook, but at the same time, there's a great need to have passing lanes constructed along that stretch of highway. And I'm sure, it's not going to fix all and prevent any future accidents from happening. But I think at the end of the day, as the minister indicated, if we can save one life, it's certainly worth it. It could be mine, it could be his, it could be a loved one. But again, I would call upon the minister to take it back to his department and try to move maybe a little quicker on constructing these passing lanes along Highway 101.
Honourable the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank the honourable member for the question and the comments and obviously the concern. Just before I go to make a comment about what he just raised, I just want to say that I know the honourable member for Hants East was here a moment ago, and I think he and the honourable member who asked the questions were raised their eyebrows when I said about the number of percentage of claims that were actually accepted and paid in Nova Scotia. But I do want to say that, as I said, we streamlined the process, and we have a new process in place in regards to those claims. The level of various claims that were paid the previous year would have been 45%, and that increased under the new system to 82%. The pothole claims, there were only 13% paid in the previous year. That has now gone last year to 60% with the new. And the windshield claims, the year before, were only 14% were paid. This past year, 89% were paid. So probably the honourable member for Richmond, those 10 that he mentioned were not paid. They were probably in the previous year, whereas of maybe I'm sure he'll see he'll see a better. Of course, we're doing so much paving around the province, Mr. Speaker. I expect to see those claims will drop substantially. Anyway, in all seriousness, Mr. Speaker, and Mr. Chair, to the honourable member, this issue about the 101 and the fatalities and injuries on the highway is a very, very serious issue. I take very seriously responsibility in the department, myself as minister, as to what we are able to do to bring those numbers down and do everything we possibly can to make our highways safe. I committed last night, and I committed to the honourable member of Kings West after we left the House that an analysis was done of 101. This area of 17 kilometres was identified for passing lanes. The design is done, and basically all that's holding us up right now is the funding. But I did commit to the honourable member for Kings West, and I will to the honourable member for Clare that we will do everything possible within our abilities to make sure that happens as soon as possible for all the very reasons the honourable member brought forward.
The honourable member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I certainly appreciate those words from the minister. I know there's only a few minutes left. I just have a few quick snappers. I want to go to Nova Scotia estimates, page 23.4. Mr. Chair, in the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure renewal for 2008-2009, there's $200,000 set aside for grants and contributions. I would like to ask the minister if he could indicate to our committee, what that funding is identified for.
Honourable the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the member opposite for the question. That amount would actually be held aside for an example of an annual amount given to the Pictou Island Ferry, for example. We make an annual allotment or grant to them each year. One thing I do want to point out that we're doing this year, I think there's probably something new that, you know, all the things we talk about in the House here about impaired driving, about the laws we can pass, I think we'd all agree that Mothers Against Drunk Driving in this province provide a tremendous service to this province. And Margaret Miller, who I know personally, whose son, Bruce Miller, was a police officer in Spring Hill, was actually killed by an impaired driver in Prince Edward Island, and she's now the national president. You know, we're very proud here in Nova Scotia that we have a Nova Scotian, you know, albeit as a result of a tragedy, we now have a lady who is actually in charge of this organization nationally. We've committed this year $15,000 to allow Mothers Against Drunk Drivers to erect large billboard signs throughout the province to remind Nova Scotians and all those people who travel on our highways what disastrous effects those who would choose to drink and drive cause on our highways. And so, you know, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, there are probably several things that the department would do throughout the year to support initiatives that may come along that we're not aware of at budget time or we don't necessarily prepare for. That in my mind would certainly be one that not only is something that is very deserving of our support, but also would be something that obviously wouldn't happen every year, and it would be something that we would be necessarily aware of. But there was an opportunity for us as a government and department to provide the $15,000 to Mothers Against Drunk Drivers to erect these large billboards. In fact, we're going to see those some of those unveiled, I think, very shortly. In fact, over the coming weeks, in regards to people who continue to drink and drive on our highways. And again, I want to congratulate Mothers Against Drunk Drivers for their great help in doing everything we possibly can, working with government to reduce the number of impaired driving and collisions on the highways as a result.
The honourable member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, in closing, I want to thank the Minister and his staff. As I've said in my opening comments, MLAs, certainly especially rural MLAs, probably a good chunk of our calls have to do with transportation issues. And as I've indicated, staff at home in Clare and Sonyville, the area supervisor in Yarmouth has always been very helpful in working with me, and I certainly want to close by thanking the Minister for sharing some of my concerns with him, and hopefully next year we'll maybe suggest to have a little more time. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll take my seat and I'll leave the Minister with some closing comments.
The Honourable, the order, please. Order, please. The Honourable, the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal, with some closing comments on his estimates.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to begin by saying thanking you and thanking the House for the opportunity to answer a wide variety of questions over the last 3 days. I guess we've been in and out of here. The Honourable Minister of Economic Development would like me to return his briefing book to him. I probably could have used it the last couple of days, but I do thank the House for the opportunity to speak about the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal. I want to thank the two critics, both from the New Democratic Party and the Liberal Party, who not only during this session and during the estimates, but throughout the last number of months that I came into the department, approached me about issues they have, not only constituency issues, but provincial issues. And I know particularly the honourable member for Clare has a great concern about road safety, around sidewalks, crosswalks, around obviously the 101 and many other issues he brings to my attention on a regular basis. And I want to thank the honourable member for that, and to assure him and the honourable the critic for the New Democratic Party that we'll always consider those good ideas. That's what government, I believe, is all about. I do want to thank them as well for the recognition they have given to our staff, both who are sitting at the table with me, who are in the gallery, and the 2,000 staff who work here in Halifax and throughout all the rest of the province, Mr. Speaker, who work for Transportation Infrastructure Renewal, because it is the dedication and professionalism of those women and men every day who continue not only to make our highways and roads safer, but work on all the various buildings and all the other issues that this department continues to provide great service, I believe, to Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, with that, I want to move the following resolution, Resolved that a sum not exceeding $350,875,000 be granted to the Lieutenant Governor to defray expenses in respect of the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure renewal pursuant to the estimate. Resolved that the business plan of Sydney Environmental Resources Limited, Sydney Steel Corporation be approved. Resolved that the business plan of Nova Scotia Lands be approved. Resolved the business plan of Harborside Commercial Park Incorporated be approved. I so move, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The motion before the committee is shall Resolution E34, E44, E45, and E46. Shall these resolutions stand? Stand. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion carried. At this time, the chair wishes to report that the time allotted for debate in Committee on Supply has now expired. The chair will recognize the chair of the Subcommittee on Supply to report on the deliberations of the subcommittee. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Mr. Chair, the Subcommittee on Supply has met and completed its maximum of 40 hours of debate allowed for consideration of the estimates by the Subcommittee on Supply.
Thank you. The report is tabled. As 40 hours have expired, the rules require that the question be now put. Shall all remaining resolutions carry? Carry. Is it agreed? All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion carried.
Order, please. The Committee on the Whole House on Supply reports.
The Chair of the Committee of the Whole House on Supply reports that the committee has completed its consideration of the estimates and resolutions referred to it, including the estimates referred to the Subcommittee on Supply, and that the committee recommends the estimates and resolutions to the favourable consideration of the House without amendment.
The motion is that the House concurs in the reports of the Committee of the Whole on Supply. Would all those in favour of the motion please say aye? Aye. Against? The motion is carried. The Honourable the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call the order of business, introduction of bills.
Introduction of bills. The Honourable the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Provide for Defraying Certain Charges and Expenses of the Public Service of the Province. Mr. Speaker, the bill is printed and I ask the pages to distribute a copy to each member. Art.
To provide for defraying certain charges and expenses of the public service of the province.
The Honourable Member, the Minister of Finance, begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Provide for Defraying Certain Charges and Expenses of the Public Service of the Province.
Bill number 175, an act to provide for defraying certain charges and expenses of the public service of the province.
The Honourable the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I move second reading of Bill 175, the Appropriations Act 2008.
The Honourable the Minister of Finance moves second reading of Bill 175, the Appropriations Act 2008. Would all those in favour of the motion please say aye? Aye. Recorded vote. So is it agreed? And what time would we allow? Right. The whips are satisfied? We will have a recorded vote. The Honourable the Clerk. The other clerk.
Mike. Ms. Bolivar-Getson.
Yes.
Mr. Hurlbert.
Yes.
Mr. Morse.
Yes.
Mr. Barnett.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Rodney McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Baker.
Yes.
Mr. McIsaac.
Yes.
Mr. Muir.
Yes.
Mr. D'Entremont.
We.
Mr. Scott.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
Mr. Dunn.
Yes.
Mr. Chisholm.
Yes.
Mr. Dukes.
Yes.
Ms. Casey.
Yes.
Ms. Stretch.
Yes.
Mr. Parent.
Yes.
Mr. Goucher.
Yes.
Mr. Porter.
Yes.
Mr. Bain.
Yes.
Mr. Fage.
Yes.
Mr. Parker.
No.
Ms. Massey.
No.
Mr. Steele.
No.
Mr. McDonnell.
No.
Ms. Moore.
No.
Ms. Maureen McDonald.
No.
Mr. Dexter.
No.
Mr. Corbett.
No.
Mr. Manning McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. McNeil. Mr. McNeil. Mr. McNeil.
Yes.
Ms. Whalen.
Yes.
Mr. Sampson.
We.
Mr. Caldwell.
Yes.
Mr. H. Dave Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. Gadet.
We.
Mr. David A. Wilson.
No.
Ms. Conrad.
No.
Mr. Paris.
No.
Ms. Raymond.
No.
Mr. Zink.
Order, please.
Mr. Pereira.
No.
Mr. Epstein.
Nay.
Mr. Goss.
No.
Ms. Kent.
No.
Mr. McKinnon.
No.
Mr. Beliveau.
No.
Nay.
Mr. Estabrooks.
Nay.
Mr. Terrio.
Yes.
Mr. Glavine.
Yes.
Do you have 31 to 20?
Twenty.
31 for, 20 against. The motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I move third reading of Bill 175, the Appropriations Act 2008.
The Honourable Minister of Finance moves third reading of Bill 175, the Appropriations Act 2008. Would all those in favour signify by saying aye? Aye. Against? Nay. Motion is carried.
Bill number 175, an act to provide for defraying certain charges and expenses of the public service of the province.
Order that the bill do pass. Order that the title be as read by the clerk. Order that the bill be engrossed. Honourable the Government House Leader.
very much, Mr. Speaker. I move that you do now leave the chair and the House resolve itself in the Committee of the Whole House on Bills.
The Honourable the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. With regards to the Committee of the Whole House on Bills for Bill number 157, the Financial Measures Act, if it is the will of the House, we could forego that and move forward with third reading of the Financial Measures Act, Bill 157.
What is the wish of the House?
Mr. Speaker, I would ask you to call Bill number 157, the Financial Measures Act.
Bill 157, the Financial Measures Act. The Honourable the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I move third reading of the bill.
The Honourable the Leader of the Official Opposition. The Honourable the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and of course, my best regards to the Minister for his stewardship of the Act and the budget through the process. I appreciate his work. It's my pleasure to rise this afternoon to speak to the Financial Measures Act, and of course, the Financial Measures Act is the act that actually implements much of what is in the budget of the province. And I say much of it because, Mr. Speaker, the nature of the Financial Measures Act is, of course, that it is an omnibus bill, and it contains many, many pieces. And the reality is, you get one vote on this, you get one vote on the budget, so you don't get to pick out those things within the budget that you would support and want to see passed, and those things on which you have a disagreement with the government. And that is the case in the case of the Financial Measures Act, as it is the case with respect to the budget. And I think the Minister of Finance actually said it best himself in a scrum after the introduction, I think it was after the announcement of the leader of the Liberal Party that they were going to support the budget. He said this is about supporting the plan of government and the direction of government. And that's really what the vote on the budget comes down to. It's what the vote on the Financial Measures Act comes down to, is the whole question of whether or not you are prepared to endorse the plan and the direction that the government has decided to follow. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that over the last couple of weeks since the budget was introduced, we and my caucus went throughout the province, and we listened. We listened to the people of Nova Scotia, and we asked them about the budget. We asked them for their input on the FMA and, of course, on the performance of the government, Mr. Speaker. And I think I can say with absolute certainty that throughout the province and across all of our constituency, it is fair to say we had almost unanimity on the fact that no one was calling for the endorsement of this government or the plan or budget that they set forward. And that is just the reality that we found right across the province, and we made a commitment to people to listen to them, to consult with them, and we did that. And it was not a split decision for a number of reasons. There was the 8% across the board increase in the electricity rates in the province. There were longer wait lists for health care right across the province. People see health care getting worse, not better. There was the absence of any kind of a seniors care plan, anything that will actually go about helping seniors stay in their families, helping caregivers to support those people in their attempt to remain independent for as long as they possibly can. I've said this before about long-term care beds. You know, Mr. Speaker, the building of long-term care beds is an important initiative. It's important that we have the right number of beds in this province to service the population. But what's fundamentally true about the seniors of our province is that they don't want long-term care beds. What they really want is their own beds.
and they want to be able to stay in their own beds as long as they possibly can. They want to remain independent, and that's why putting in place a seniors care plan that has things like a home adoption program that includes self-managed care, that is why these kinds of initiatives should have been included in the FMA, and it's sadly not the case, Mr. Speaker. Of course, we heard much about the handling by the Premier and by others in his government of various issues, everything from the cabinet cars right through to decisions with respect to that go back really before this to the handing out of patronage appointments, Mr. Speaker. We heard almost unanimously an opinion of this government that rings right across the province, and that is that they are simply out of touch with the lives that ordinary people in this province are living. They don't seem to understand what kind of a hardship something like the 8% increase across the board on electricity is going to be when you add that to the increasing costs of home heating oil, the increasing costs of energy, the increasing costs of food, that this is just another burden that shouldn't have been piled on top. And Mr. Speaker, what makes it particularly galling, I think, for most people, is that the Premier himself ran on this commitment, that he went to people, he said, you can trust me, you can believe what I have to say, that I will live up to these commitments. So when they look at this budget and they say, well, isn't this just a complete breach of faith with respect to the people of the province who voted for him and who said that this was what they were going to do? Isn't that what this amounts to? Well, Mr. Speaker, that's what brought, I think, many people in the province, and certainly our caucus, to the conclusion that even though there are things like Avastin funding and other pieces within the budget that we very much support, that we could not endorse the government's direction, the government's plan with respect to this province, because it is so out of touch with people's lives. Mr. Speaker, many of the things with respect to the budget actually aren't in this budget. For example, if you look at the personal income tax increases for the personal deductions, those were actually in the last budget, and they were actually in the last Financial Measures Act that was passed, and they're going to go ahead. I know the government mentions them in the budget, but they're not part of this budget. They were part of a previous budget, and the government plays fast and loose when they try to say, well, you're voting against these things. You're not, because they're not included in this budget. Mr. Speaker, I must say, when we're considering pieces of legislation like this, one of the things you do is you hear all of the debate that takes place. And I couldn't help but listen the other night when the member from Richmond stood up to speak on the Financial Measures Act. And he said that to support an increase in the basic electricity rates was showing leadership and courage. Mr. Speaker, this is hard to believe. It's hard to believe that someone could consider it either leadership or courage to put an 8% increase on electricity to people who are working hard just to make ends meet. Mr. Speaker, this is not courage. It is callous. Mr. Speaker, it's hard to believe that you can put an 8% increase in electricity rates on people who are simply trying to provide and work for their families. It's not leadership. It's a lack of imagination. We fought hard for a low-income energy relief program that, in concert with the reduction in the HST, would have meant that the low-income families would have received more rather than less than the former Keep the Heat program. That's right, Mr. Speaker. They receive less than the former Keep the Heat program. Low-income Nova Scotians will receive less. The same thing we could not, this is the same thing that we could not support. They have to treat it, I suppose, as a victory, because if they did not, then they would have received nothing at all. So why would you support the FMA that supports such a poor and callous budget? Well, you have to look at the past performance. Now, the third party created the HST, which increased the cost of everything from socks to gloves, everything from over-the-counter children's medication to, if you can imagine, Mr. Speaker, when they created the HST, they started to tax the home care, the private home care delivery that you get for your loved ones. That's what the HST did. Mr. Speaker, the HST that was created is a tax on the funerals that, of course, they now complain about. And, of course, Mr. Speaker, it also increased the price of gasoline by 1.5 cents. They don't object to the government increasing it on electricity. Why? Because when they were the government, they were the ones that created the biggest tax grab in the province's history. And not only that, Mr. Speaker, for your edification and for members of the government who weren't here, and even members of my caucus that weren't here, and I wasn't here at the time, but I took the time to become informed, they also increased the motor fuel tax by 2 cents. They increased the provincial sales tax by 1 cent. In fact, they increased the cost of gasoline by 4.5 cents. And now, Mr. Speaker, I want you to understand how ironic that really is. But I digress. This is actually a time to talk about the Financial Measures Act, so I want to get back with this. It's a very, very simple thing. It's a very simple thing, Mr. Speaker. For average Nova Scotians and their families, they will be worse off, not better off, Mr. Speaker. And that is the fundamental reason why we vote against the Financial Measures Act and why we're voting against this budget, because today's families deserve a better deal. This isn't it, and we're voting against it. There we go.
The Honourable, the Leader of the Liberal Party. Honourable, the Leader of the Liberal Party.
I want to begin, as I talk on Bill 157, I want to speak to the Minister of Finance on behalf of our caucus and on behalf of Nova Scotians, and thank him for the courage that he's shown over the last number of months, and particularly and I look forward to this summer. I'm sure being in a few parades on the South Shore with the Minister of Finance, trying to convince the good people of the South Shore to support either one of our respective points of view. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to stand and speak on this bill. It is the same today. It is the same today. Mr. Speaker, I will not apologize, and our caucus will not apologize for fighting for Nova Scotians. This budget is not our budget. It's the government's budget. But there are things in it that we fought for. There are things in it that we demanded that be provided to Nova Scotians. Nova Scotians were telling us that there's a shortage in many communities across this province for physicians. And we were laying out a clear policy initiative how to deal with that issue for Nova Scotians, dealing with the real issues that are facing Nova Scotia families today. And we laid out a policy directive. Well, it wasn't the entire policy that we put out. This government accepted that policy and now set aside 10 seats that will ensure that those rural communities who have been struggling for years and years and years will have access to a family physician. Mr. Speaker. That policy wasn't based on short-term political gain, Mr. Speaker. It was based on a long-term view for Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, we also been fighting as a caucus for in-home support program. And Mr. Speaker, while the leader of the New Democratic Party wants to take shots at us for fighting for Nova Scotians, We've been the party in this House fighting for in-home support. We've been the party in this House fighting for self-managed care. And it is because of this caucus Nova Scotians with disabilities have a self-managed care program today. We weren't talking about it, we were fighting for them. And Mr. Speaker, it is because of this caucus that there's an in-home support program that will become spread across Nova Scotia to making sure seniors get the care they deserve where and when they want it, and we believe they should have that care in their home for as long as possible, and that's why we have fought for that program, and that's why we're supporting this budget today, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we're supporting this budget based on a number of issues, Aveston being one of them. This party demanded that this government fund it. They funded it. Not only did they do that, Mr. Speaker, they listened to the good member from Glace Bay who's been in this House fighting for a colorectal screening program for the people of Nova Scotia. That's in this budget, Mr. Speaker. We asked for a tax credit for transit use. It's in this budget, Mr. Speaker. We asked for a tax credit for seniors. It is in this budget. Mr. Speaker, we asked for and fought for low-income Nova Scotians who were struggling to meet their needs when it comes to heating. You know, we can talk about the 8% coming off. Mr. Speaker, there are many Nova Scotians who can't afford to pay the bill. They can't afford to pay the bill. Giving the 8% on a bill they can't afford to pay doesn't make any sense. Mr. Speaker, it doesn't make any sense. To keep the heat rebate program is putting hands in the money of low-income Nova Scotians to make sure that they do not have to choose between keeping warm and keeping cold. And Mr. Speaker, we have continued to fight for that, and we continue to fight for that. And there's one thing, Mr. Speaker, that I will not be, is a hypocrite. And Mr. Speaker, I cannot ask this government to deliver on these things, and when they do, stand in the House and vote against it based on sheer political purposes. Mr. Speaker, this is not from our party an endorsement of the direction of this government. Is it an endorsement of this budget? We are supporting this budget. We were the first party in this House to stand up and tell Nova Scotians we would not support Bill number 1. They waited for our decision. Then they came out and spoke. Mr. Speaker, we were the first party to stand up and say we would support the budget. Then they made their decision, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we also are the party in this House that have made it very clear we will not support Bill 126 that is presently on the order paper because we don't believe it's in the best interest of Nova Scotians. This vote is based on the budget today. This vote is based on the things that we believe Nova Scotians have been asking for. This vote, and we as a caucus will not apologizing for standing up and fighting for Nova Scotians, nor will we apologize for doing what Nova Scotians have asked us to do a little less than 2 years ago. That was to come to this House and somehow find common ground to provide them with a balanced approach to governing. And we have taken that job seriously. I have taken my job seriously as leader of the Nova Scotia Liberal Party, and I will continue to do that. And I will not apologize to anyone for supporting this piece of legislation, and I am prepared to defend our decision as a caucus as we go around Nova Scotia, and we will continue to hold this government accountable for the decisions that they make, and we will continue to fight for a reduced motor fuel tax. We will continue to fight for an end of gas regulation. But, Mr. Speaker, this is about trying to find balance and doing the job that Nova Scotians asked us to do when they elected each and every one of us to this House, and that's what this caucus has done, and we will continue to do that, and that is why we are supporting this budget. Hear, hear.
If I recognize the minister, it will be to close debate. The Honourable the Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my remarks on closing debate will be brief.
Order, please.
First and foremost, in the period leading into the budget this year, I made it clear to Nova Scotians and to every member of this House that there would be tough choices to be made, that the choices to be made would not be easy, and that those choices would be ones which we, on this side of the House, believed would be made in the best interest of all Nova Scotians. Much has been said about our choice to change the rules around the taxation of domestic electricity not used for heating. That was one of those tough choices that we had to make. And that tough choice was made because we had other programs which we believed were even more important, which needed to be financed. An example, of course, is the Keep the Heat program and the money for the Salvation Army for the less fortunate Nova Scotians. But another example of an equally good, equally important program, Mr. Speaker, is the program of the Family Farmer Care program. $180,000 more of our citizens will have health coverage as a result of that decision. And Mr. Speaker, given the choice, we would do it over again. Now, I recognize full well that the budget that was submitted by the government is neither the budget of the Liberal Party nor the budget of the New Democratic Party. That is the nature of our system. However, we all came here with a duty to make minority government work. That duty transcends our duty to our political parties, it's a duty to Nova Scotians. And I would like to thank the Liberal Party and their leader for making minority government work. It is a very difficult thing sometimes to be against something. It is sometimes even harder to be for something. And Mr. Speaker, they showed the courage today to be for something. And Mr. Speaker, that deserves a note. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, this was a budget that was about choices. We believe that the choices were the right choices for Nova Scotians, the right choices that will support Nova Scotian families over the forthcoming year. And Mr. Speaker, we will do our best to deliver on the faith that has been shown by the House over the forthcoming year to make sure that Nova Scotian families and seniors and students benefit from the choices that were made in this House today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And with that, I move third reading.
The motion is for third reading of Bill number 157. Is the House ready for the question? There's a request for a recorded vote. Have an agreement? Are the whips satisfied? Whips are satisfied? Recorded vote.
Ms. Bolivar-Getson.
Yes.
Mr. Hurlbert.
Yes.
Mr. Morse.
Yes.
Mr. Barnett.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Rodney McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Baker.
Yes.
Mr. McIsaac.
Yes.
Mr. Muir.
Yes.
Mr. D'Entremont.
Oui.
Mr. Scott.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
Mr. Dunn.
Yes.
Mr. Chisholm.
Yes.
Mr. Dukes.
Yes.
Ms. Casey.
Yes.
Ms. Stretch.
Yes.
Mr. Parent.
Yes.
Mr. Goucher.
Yes.
Mr. Porter.
Yes.
Mr. Bain.
Yes.
Mr. Fage.
Yes.
Mr. Parker.
No.
Ms. Massey.
No.
Mr. Steele.
No.
Mr. McDonnell.
No.
Ms. Moore.
No.
Ms. Maureen McDonald.
No.
Mr. Dexter.
No.
Mr. Corbett.
No.
Mr. Manning McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. McNeil.
Yes.
Ms. Whalen.
Yes.
Mr. Samson.
We.
Mr. Caldwell.
Yes.
Mr. H. Dave Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. Gadet.
Oui.
Mr. David A. Wilson,
No.
Ms. Conrad,
No.
Mr. Paris,
No.
Ms. Raymond,
No.
Mr. Zink,
No.
Mr. Prera,
No.
Mr. Epstein,
Nay.
Mr. Goss,
No.
Ms. Kent,
No.
Mr. McKinnon,
No.
Mr. Beliveau,
No.
Mr. Estabrooks,
Nay.
Mr. Terrio,
Yes.
Mr. Glavine.
Yes.
Reported from the clerk.
Those in favor of the motion, 31. Those against, 20.
The motion has carried.
Bill number 157, an act respecting certain financial measures.
Ordered that the bill do pass. Ordered that the title be as read by the clerk. Ordered that the bill be engrossed. The Honourable, the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That concludes the government's business for today. I would move that you now do rise, meet again on Tuesday. Hours will be from 6 to 9. After the daily routine, we'll be calling public bills for second reading. Number 120, 127, 130, 131, and 133.
The question before the House is that we now rise and meet again on Tuesday from 6 to 9. Are you ready for the question? All in favor? Against? Motion is carried.